From the outside, the Miller family was the picture of perfection. David and Emily Miller were the kind of parents everyone admired. Hardworking, devoted, and always smiling. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the lawns were perfectly manicured, and the streets were lined with oak trees that whispered secrets to the wind. Their two children, Ethan and Lily, were the pride of the family. At 17 and 16, they were more than just siblings. They were best friends, confidants, and partners in crime. Ethan and Lily were inseparable. They shared everything: a room, a school, even friends. Their bond was so tight that people often joked they were more like twins than brother and sister. They laughed at the same jokes, finished each other's sentences, and seemed to have their own secret language. To their parents, it was heartwarming. To their friends, it was enviable. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect lives, something darker was brewing. Their closeness was undeniable, but as they grew older, it began to shift in ways no one could have predicted. What started as innocent childhood bonding would soon spiral into a dangerous secret, one that would tear their family apart and leave a trail of heartbreak, betrayal, and tragedy. The Millers' home, once filled with laughter and love, would become a house of secrets. And the bond between Ethan and Lily, once their greatest strength, would become their ultimate downfall. But how did it all go so wrong? And who would pay the ultimate price? Stick around, because this is a story you won't believe until the very end. As Ethan and Lily grew older, their bond began to change in ways neither of them fully understood. The innocent games and shared secrets of childhood gave way to something more complicated, more intense. They were each other's first everything: first friend, first confidant, first shoulder to cry on. When Ethan's first crush ended in heartbreak, it was Lily who stayed up with him, wiping his tears and reminding him he was enough. When Lily struggled with the pressures of high school, it was Ethan who encouraged her, telling her she was smarter and stronger than she believed. But as they navigated the turbulent waters of adolescence, their reliance on each other deepened in ways that blurred the lines between sibling love and something far more dangerous. They began to share things they shouldn't: whispers in the dark, lingering touches, and glances that lasted a moment too long. It started small, almost imperceptible, but over time, it grew into something neither of them could ignore. Ethan, in particular, found himself struggling with feelings he couldn't explain. At 17, he was curious about the changes in his body and the urges he couldn't control. Like many teenagers, he stumbled into the world of online porn. At first, it was just curiosity, a late-night search here, a quick video there. But soon, it became an addiction. He would wait until the house was quiet, then sneak onto his laptop, losing himself in the forbidden images. The more he watched, the more he craved. He became reckless, clicking on videos during the day when his parents were at work and Lily was supposed to be at soccer practice. But one afternoon, everything changed. Ethan was in their shared room, the door slightly ajar, his headphones plugged in as he clicked on a video. He was so absorbed that he didn't hear the soft creak of the door opening. Lily walked in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes widening as she realized what he was watching. Ethan froze, his face flushing red with embarrassment. He fumbled to close the tab, his heart pounding in his chest. But Lily didn't leave. Instead, she stood there, her curiosity piqued. What are you watching?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of innocence and something else. Something darker. That moment would mark the beginning of a shift neither of them could have predicted. A shift that would change their lives forever. The room was thick with tension. Ethan's heart raced as he fumbled to close the tab, his face burning with shame. He couldn't believe Lily had caught him. He expected her to leave, to laugh it off, or maybe even scold him. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the screen he had just tried to hide. "Wait," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to see." Ethan's stomach churned. This was wrong, so wrong. But the curiosity in Lily's eyes mirrored his own. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, he considered shutting the laptop and pretending none of this had happened. But something inside him, something dark and irresistible, pushed him to click play. The video started again, the sounds filling the room. Ethan couldn't look at Lily, but he could feel her presence beside him, her breath quickening as she watched. Slowly, the awkwardness gave way to something else, a shared curiosity that neither of them could resist. Their hands brushed, and then, almost instinctively, they were kissing. It was hesitant at first, a clumsy exploration of lips and tongues. But soon, the hesitation melted away, replaced by a hunger that neither of them had ever felt before. Their bodies pressed together, their hands exploring in ways that felt both wrong and irresistible. Clothes were shed, and before they knew it, they had crossed a line they could never uncross. When it was over, they lay side by side, their breathing heavy, their minds racing. Neither of them spoke for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "We can't tell anyone," he said, his voice shaky but firm. This has to stay between us." Lily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what they had done was wrong, but the thrill of it, the forbidden nature of it, was intoxicating. She felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name: guilt, excitement, confusion, all swirling together in a storm she couldn't control. For Ethan, the guilt was immediate and overwhelming. He couldn't believe what they had done. This was his sister. His sister. And yet, a part of him couldn't deny the excitement he had felt. It was a dangerous, intoxicating feeling, one that both terrified and exhilarated him. Lily, on the other hand, was more conflicted. She had always loved Ethan, but this was different. This was something deeper, something she couldn't quite understand. She wanted to talk about it, to make sense of what had happened, but Ethan's silence made it clear that this was a secret they would take to the grave. And so, their secret began. From that day on, their relationship changed in ways neither of them could have predicted. They became experts at hiding their affair, stealing moments whenever their parents were out of the house. What started as a one-time mistake quickly spiraled into a full-blown forbidden relationship, one that would consume them both. But secrets have a way of catching up to you, no matter how careful you are. And this secret would soon lead to a tragedy that would shatter their family forever. Over the next few months, Ethan and Lily lived a double life. To the outside world, they were just a close-knit brother and sister, sharing a room, a school, and a childhood full of memories. But behind closed doors, they were something else entirely. Lovers bound by a secret so dark it could destroy everything they knew. Their parents, David and Emily, were oblivious. They were workaholics, often leaving the house early and returning late, exhausted from long hours at their jobs. Ethan and Lily became experts at timing their moments, stealing glances and touches whenever they were alone. They developed a system of signals, a certain knock on the door, a text message with a single word, a look that spoke volumes. "Movie night?" Ethan would text, and Lily would know it was code for their parents being gone for hours. "Homework," Lily would whisper, and Ethan would understand it was safe to slip into her room. The thrill of secrecy was intoxicating. Every stolen kiss, every whispered promise, every moment of intimacy felt like a victory against the world. But beneath the surface, guilt began to creep in. For Ethan, the guilt manifested as paranoia. He became hyper-aware of every sound, every movement in the house. He would jump at the slightest noise, convinced that their parents had found out. He started to distance himself from Lily, snapping at her for being too careless, too clingy. "We have to be more careful," he would say, his voice tense. "If anyone finds out, we're ruined." Lily, on the other hand, struggled with a different kind of guilt. She had always been the more emotional of the two, and as the weeks turned into months, she began to see their relationship as something deeper, something that could last. She started to imagine a future with Ethan, a life where they could be together without hiding. "What if we just left?" she asked one night, her voice trembling with hope. "We could go somewhere no one knows us. Start over." Ethan's face darkened. "Don't be stupid, Lily. That's not how this works. This is a mistake, a dangerous one. We can't keep doing this." His words cut her deeply. She had always thought their relationship was special, something worth fighting for. But to Ethan, it was a secret that needed to be buried. The cracks began to show. Lily would cry herself to sleep, wondering if Ethan truly loved her or if she was just a convenience. She started to feel trapped, torn between her love for her brother and the growing realization that their relationship was toxic. Ethan, meanwhile, became more controlling. He would monitor Lily's every move, questioning her if she spent too much time with friends or came home late. He was consumed by fear. Fear of being caught, fear of losing control, fear of the consequences. "Where were you?" he demanded one evening when Lily returned from a friend's house. "Just hanging out with Sarah," she replied, her voice defensive. "You were gone too long," Ethan snapped. "What if someone noticed? What if they start asking questions?" Lily felt a pang of frustration. "I can't just stop living my life, Ethan. I'm not a prisoner." But the truth was, she was a prisoner of their secret, of their love, of the guilt that weighed heavier with each passing day. As the months went by, their relationship became more intense and consuming, but also more toxic. Ethan's paranoia grew, and Lily's heart ached with the weight of their secret. She began to wonder if they were doomed from the start, if their love was always meant to end in tragedy. But for now, they continued their double life, stealing moments of forbidden intimacy while the world around them remained blissfully unaware. Little did they know, their secret was about to catch up to them in the most devastating way. Lily's world came crashing down the day she saw those two pink lines. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in disbelief. Her hands trembled, and her mind raced with 1,000 questions. How could this have happened? What would her parents say? What would Ethan say? She waited until late that night to tell him, her heart pounding as she whispered the news. Ethan's face went pale, his eyes wide with shock. For a long moment, he just stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she had said. "We have to get rid of it," he finally blurted out, his voice cold and firm. Lily's heart sank. She had expected fear, maybe even anger, but the coldness in his voice cut her deeply. "Ethan, I don't know if I can do that," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan's desperation was palpable. He began researching clinics, making appointments, and even buying abortion pills online. He was relentless, his fear of shame and scandal driving him to push Lily harder than ever. "We can't keep it," he said over and over, his voice rising with each repetition. "Do you understand what will happen if anyone finds out? Our lives will be over." Lily felt trapped. She couldn't bear the thought of ending the pregnancy, but she also couldn't imagine facing her parents with the truth. She was torn between her love for Ethan and the growing life inside her. Finally, they went to a doctor, hoping for a solution. The visit was tense, the air thick with unspoken fear. The doctor's news was grim. "The pregnancy is already 4 months along," the doctor said, her tone clinical but not unkind. "At this stage, an abortion carries significant risks. There's a 50-50 chance of complications, including the possibility of infertility or even death." Lily's heart sank as the doctor's words echoed in her mind. She looked at Ethan, hoping to see some sign of support, but his face was a mask of cold determination. "We'll do it," he said, his voice firm. Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't," she whispered. I can't." The tension between them grew unbearable. Ethan became more controlling, monitoring Lily's every move, questioning her if she spent too much time alone or seemed distant. He was consumed by fear. Fear of being caught, fear of losing control, fear of the consequences. Lily, on the other hand, felt more isolated than ever. She started to imagine a life with the baby, a life where she could be free from the toxic cycle of her relationship with Ethan. But the reality of their situation loomed over her like a dark cloud. One night, after another heated argument, Ethan snapped. "If you won't do it, then I will," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Lily's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving Lily alone with her thoughts. The next few days were a blur. Ethan became distant, his behavior increasingly erratic. Lily tried to talk to him, to reason with him, but he shut her out completely. Then, one evening, Ethan came home with a strange look in his eyes. He handed Lily a glass of water, his hands trembling slightly. "Drink this," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. Lily hesitated, her instincts screaming at her that something was wrong. But she trusted Ethan, or at least she wanted to. She took the glass and drank. As the poison took effect, Lily's last thoughts were of her brother and the betrayal that had destroyed them both. Ethan's mind was a storm of fear and desperation. The thought of anyone finding out about Lily's pregnancy consumed him. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Every passing day felt like a ticking time bomb, and he was convinced that the only way to silence it was to silence Lily. It started as a dark thought, a fleeting idea that he quickly pushed away. But as the days turned into weeks, the idea took root, growing darker and more twisted until it became a plan. He began researching poisons online, his hands trembling as he typed the words into the search bar. He found what he was looking for, a substance that could be easily dissolved in a drink, one that would leave no trace. He ordered it, his heart pounding as he clicked the Buy Now button. When the package arrived, Ethan hid it in his drawer, waiting for the right moment. That moment came sooner than he expected. One afternoon, while Ethan was at work, Lily took his phone to charge it. As she scrolled through his messages, her heart stopped. There, in a chat with an unknown person, were the words that would change everything. "You need to get rid of her," the person had written. "It's the only way." Lily's hands shook as she read the messages. She quickly took a screenshot, her mind racing. She knew she had to protect herself, to leave evidence in case something happened to her. She grabbed a piece of paper and began to write, her tears blurring the words as she detailed everything that had happened between her and Ethan. She hid the note in her diary, along with the screenshot, and prayed that no one would ever have to read it. That night, Ethan came home with a strange look in his eyes. He handed Lily a glass of water, his hands trembling slightly. "Drink this," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. Lily hesitated, her instincts screaming at her that something was wrong. But she trusted Ethan, or at least she wanted to. She took the glass and drank. As the poison took effect, Lily's body began to weaken. She tried to call for help, but her voice was barely a whisper. She collapsed onto the floor, her vision blurring as the life drained from her body. Ethan watched, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by relief. The secret was safe. The next morning, the Miller family was shattered. Lily was gone, and Ethan was nowhere to be found. The police were called, and the investigation began. As David and Emily sorted through Lily's belongings, they found the diary. The note inside was like a punch to the gut. They read it in stunned silence, their hearts breaking with every word. "If anything happens to me," Lily had written, "Ethan is responsible." The parents' grief was overwhelming, but it was quickly replaced by anger and disbelief. How could their son do such a thing? Ethan, meanwhile, was on the run. He had fled the house in a panic, leaving behind everything he had ever known. The police issued a warrant for his arrest, and the media quickly picked up the story. The community was in shock. How could something like this happen in their quiet neighborhood? How could a brother do such a thing to his own sister? As we speak, Ethan is still out there, hiding in the shadows. But for how long? The moment David and Emily Miller found Lily's diary, their world shattered. The words on the page were like a knife to their hearts, each sentence revealing a truth too horrifying to comprehend. Their daughter's handwriting, once so full of life, now told a story of betrayal, fear, and ultimate sacrifice. "If anything happens to me," Lily had written, "Ethan is responsible." David's hands trembled as he held the note, his mind struggling to process what he was reading. Emily collapsed into a chair, her sobs echoing through the silent house. How could their son, their own flesh and blood, do something so unspeakable? The police were called, and the investigation began. Detectives combed through the Miller house, gathering evidence and interviewing neighbors. The media frenzy was immediate, with headlines screaming about the brother who betrayed and the forbidden affair that ended in tragedy. The community was in shock. How could something like this happen in their quiet suburban neighborhood? Parents hugged their children tighter, neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and everyone wondered how they could have missed the signs. As the days turned into weeks, the manhunt for Ethan intensified. Police followed leads, tracked sightings, and appealed to the public for information. But Ethan was nowhere to be found. The Miller family became the center of a media storm, their grief and pain broadcast for the world to see. David and Emily struggled to come to terms with the loss of their daughter and the betrayal of their son. They clung to each other, their love the only thing keeping them from falling apart. And as we speak, Ethan is still out there, hiding in the shadows. But for how long?